Today, we're taking a closer look at a case where science and straightforward medical evidence dismantled a carefully crafted illusion that had been built over months. It's the story of how law enforcement encountered a biological paradox on the side of a highway, and how the truth turned out to be far more disturbing than anyone first imagined. Before we get into the investigation, I have one big favor to ask. If you enjoy these deep dive cases, please support the channel. Your likes, subscriptions, and comments are what make it possible for me to keep bringing you stories like this. Be sure to share your thoughts as we go. I always read your comments carefully. Now, let's get into the facts. The morning of October 9th, 2020. A highway near the Texas-Oklahoma state line. A patrol officer is pursuing a Toyota Corolla that's weaving unpredictably across the road. The driver's behavior is so erratic that, at highway speed, the car strikes a hawk flying overhead. The bird becomes lodged in the front grille, and only then does the vehicle pull onto the shoulder, slamming on the brakes. The officer steps out of his cruiser and approaches the driver's window. What he sees instantly turns a routine traffic stop into a full-scale emergency. Behind the wheel sits a woman whose clothes are completely soaked in blood. Resting on her lap is a tiny newborn who isn't making a sound. The umbilical cord hasn't been cut. It's simply been tucked hastily into the waistband of her athletic leggings. The woman shouts that her son was born roughly 35 minutes earlier, while she was still driving. At the same time, she refuses medical assistance and refuses to be taken to the nearest hospital in Texas. Instead, she aggressively demands that officers escort her across the state line to a hospital in Idabel, Oklahoma, insisting that her husband is already waiting for her there. By pure coincidence, an off-duty nurse happens to drive past the scene. As soon as she realizes there's an emergency on the shoulder, she pulls over and rushes to the car. Seeing that the newborn has turned blue, she immediately begins CPR. A short time later, paramedic Elton Crossland arrives. While the medical team fights to save the infant, the driver's behavior leaves everyone stunned. Instead of watching the resuscitation efforts, the woman grabs a bottle of water and a towel. With obvious disgust, she begins scrubbing the blood from her legs, complaining out loud about how badly she'd gotten herself dirty. As paramedics begin a thorough examination of the newborn, the first major inconsistencies appear in their reports. The baby is completely cold to the touch. There isn't a trace of the creamy protective coating that's normally present on a newborn during the first hours after birth. Even more telling, the fluids and blood on the infant's body have already dried completely. To any experienced medical professional, the conclusion is immediate. This birth did not happen 35 minutes earlier, and it most certainly did not happen in the driver's seat of that car. The woman tells responders that her due date was September 30th, but the date on the calendar is October 9th. Logically, everyone should have been looking at a full-term, or even overdue, newborn. Instead, the medical team is holding a premature infant. Inside the ambulance, doctors cut away the patient's blood-soaked leggings. As they do, the placenta falls onto the floor. Even then, the driver stubbornly sticks to her story, insisting the birth happened suddenly behind the wheel, while medical staff change her into a clean hospital gown. One detail immediately stands out. That clean gown had already been packed and waiting on the front passenger seat before anyone arrived. Under police escort, the woman is taken to the emergency department at a hospital in Oklahoma. The on-call obstetrician-gynecologist takes over the examination. The exam reveals absolutely no tears, no microscopic injuries, and none of the uterine changes that would normally be expected after a recent delivery. To settle the question scientifically once and for all, the doctor orders a blood test for human chorionic gonadotropin. This is the pregnancy hormone that is naturally present in extremely high levels during pregnancy and remains detectable for several weeks after giving birth. The lab results completely dismantle the woman's story. There isn't the slightest trace of human chorionic gonadotropin in her blood. The medical evidence leaves no room for debate. This woman had not been pregnant, and from a physiological standpoint, she could not have given birth. Now only the facts remain. A blue, unresponsive newborn, dried blood inside the Toyota, and a woman whose entire story has just been disproven by laboratory testing. If science completely rules out childbirth, then one question becomes impossible to ignore. Whose son was she transporting down that highway? To answer that, we have to go back 5 years. That's where this entire chain of events begins. In 2015, the woman from the blood-soaked Toyota Taylor Parker is admitted to a hospital after experiencing an ectopic pregnancy. The situation requires emergency surgery. Doctors perform a complete hysterectomy, removing her uterus. Her medical records document an undeniable fact. From that moment on, Parker permanently loses the physical ability to carry a pregnancy. That information is later officially confirmed by both her mother and her former husbands. A few years later, Taylor meets Wade Griffin at a Texas rodeo. He's an ordinary roofing foreman. Before long, Parker begins constructing an entirely fictional version of her life. She tells Wade that she's the incredibly wealthy heiress to the Morton Salt and Blackburn family fortunes. To make her story believable, Taylor begins forging financial documents. She writes fake bank checks for $150,000 and proudly shows them to Wade. Next, she creates several fake email accounts, pretending they belong to wealthy and influential relatives who don't actually exist. Using those accounts, Parker regularly sends emails to herself, staging what looks like ongoing business and family correspondence. When Wade starts asking why the promised millions have never shown up in their accounts, Taylor comes up with an even bigger story. She claims she's being hunted by hired enforcers connected to a Mexican cartel. Looking at this chain of deception, I keep coming back to one question. Why didn't a grown man spend 5 minutes checking any of these stories online? But the interview records confirm one simple fact. Griffin didn't question a single word she said. Before long, Parker moves on to the next phase of her plan and tells Wade she's pregnant. Since carrying a pregnancy is medically impossible for her, she orders a silicone pregnancy belly online for $130. The kit includes several prosthetic inserts designed to imitate different stages of pregnancy, allowing her waistline to appear larger month after month. At the same time, Taylor purchases fake ultrasound images and positive pregnancy tests, printing them out to show Wade. To make the story completely believable to everyone around them, she schedules a professional maternity photo shoot during the August heat and even throws a large gender reveal party. Inside their home, Taylor establishes complete control. She strictly forbids Wade from touching her stomach. She says she's terrified that any pressure could harm the unborn son or lead to pregnancy complications. Griffin fully accepts that explanation and keeps his distance throughout what he believes is the entire pregnancy. Then, in the spring of 2020, hospitals across the United States introduce strict health restrictions. Parker quickly realizes those rules work in her favor. On the days of her supposed prenatal appointments, Wade drives her to the women's health clinic, but waits outside in the parking lot. Hospital policies at the time prohibit visitors from accompanying patients into examination rooms. As a result, Griffin never speaks with a doctor and never sees an ultrasound monitor. Every update about the pregnancy comes exclusively from Taylor. The fake pregnancy drags on for an unbelievable 10 months. Wade's relatives begin noticing that the timeline simply doesn't add up. His mother learns about Taylor's hysterectomy through mutual acquaintances and tells her son directly that Parker cannot physically be pregnant. Taylor immediately fires back, accusing his family of spreading lies. She turns Wade against his own relatives. In the end, he cuts off contact with his family and becomes completely isolated, leaving Parker in total control of the information he hears. At this point, the clock is ticking. A fake pregnancy can't go on forever. Her fabricated due date has already come and gone. Wade's family has been pushed out of the picture. Now Parker needs one thing above all else: a living newborn to make her story appear real. To pull that off, she needs a real expectant mother. That's when her attention shifts to 21-year-old Reagan Hancock. Reagan lives in the small Texas town of New Boston. She and her daughter, Kinley, are building a quiet life together. She's active in her local cowboy church and is getting ready to marry her fiancé, Homer. Taylor begins working her way into Reagan's personal life, one step at a time. She offers her services as the wedding photographer. It's the perfect role for earning someone's trust. A photographer has a legitimate reason to be present throughout every stage of the celebration, capturing the most important moments along the way. Not long after the wedding, Reagan announces that she's expecting a son. Doctors estimate that the baby is due in November. The moment Taylor learns that, she carefully adjusts the timeline of her own fake pregnancy to match Reagan's real one. The two women begin communicating regularly. They exchange messages, talk about buying diapers and infant formula, and discuss preparations for the new arrival. Taylor repeatedly shows Reagan her growing silicone pregnancy belly and even shares fake ultrasound printouts. You know, every time I go through the evidence from this stage of the case, I keep coming back to the same question. How do you recognize a threat when it's disguised as something so ordinary? Most of us expect danger to come from an aggressive stranger. Instead, here it's someone sitting on the future victim's couch, casually sipping morning coffee from a paper cup. No obvious hostility, just a calculated effort to gather information while hiding behind the image of a caring friend. By October 8th, the pressure reaches its breaking point. Parker decides to start looking for a random target. She drives to a local women's health clinic, sits on a bench outside the entrance, and stays there for exactly 2 hours. Later, investigators recover a list of license plate numbers from her phone. Taylor had been recording the vehicles of women visiting the clinic. But that plan falls apart for one simple reason. Nearly every expectant mother leaves the building accompanied by a husband, partner, or family member. Carrying out an attack in broad daylight, with witnesses everywhere, simply isn't possible. That leaves Reagan as Taylor's only realistic option. Later that same day, October 8th, Parker calmly stops by Reagan Hancock's home. The two spend time together in the nursery, talking peacefully while sorting through baby clothes. The night before, she puts her plan into motion. Parker has one final obstacle to remove. She has to cancel the fake delivery she'd promised Wade. Taylor downloads a voice-changing app and places an anonymous call to a regional hospital. She reports that there's a bomb inside the building. The hospital immediately launches a full-scale security response, and by morning, Taylor has the perfect explanation for why doctors supposedly couldn't admit her. With extra time now on her side, Parker doesn't sleep at all. Until sunrise, her digital history shows a series of highly focused internet searches. She watches instructional videos about performing a cesarean section and studies medical guides on how to resuscitate a premature newborn. At that point, The plan is fully in motion. The morning of October 9th begins with complete isolation. Before sunrise, Taylor moves into the active phase of her plan. Her first objective is to get Wade out of town so she'll have complete freedom to act. Using an app that disguises phone numbers, Parker sends Wade a text message posing as a potential customer. The message urgently requests that he deliver 150 wild hogs to a remote ranch in Oklahoma. Completely unaware of what's happening, Wade starts his pickup truck and heads out on a 4-hour drive. With that, the area is effectively cleared. At 7:50 that morning, Reagan's husband, Homer, leaves for work. Taylor is already nearby, quietly watching him drive away. Once she's inside the house, the very first thing she does is take Reagan's phone. She needs to buy herself time and make sure Homer has no reason to suddenly turn around and come back home. Using Reagan's phone, Taylor sends Homer a series of text messages. The messages claim that Reagan is tired of the marriage, that their relationship has reached a dead end, and that she wants a divorce immediately. Shocked by the sudden change in tone, Homer tries to find out what's going on through text, but he stays at work. You know, in the age of smartphones, we put an incredible amount of trust in what's on a screen. A message comes from your wife, and you never stop to wonder who's actually typing it. It's the perfect form of digital sabotage. Between 9:14 and 9:26 that morning, cell tower records establish one undeniable fact. Taylor's primary phone, her disposable cell phone, and Reagan's phone all begin moving away from the house at the same time, traveling in the same direction. Later, Parker destroys Reagan's phone, eliminating that trail completely. Then, at 9:43 a.m., chance changes everything. A neighbor across the street notices the Hancock family's Labrador running loose in the road and sees that the garage door is partially open. She sends Homer a text message. Alarmed, he immediately begins calling Reagan over and over again. At 9:58, 10:02, 10:04, and 10:06. No one answers. Panicked, he asks the neighbor to check on the house. At approximately 10:15 a.m., Reagan's mother, Jessica, walks inside. The living room floor is covered in blood. 21-year-old Reagan has lost her life, and her newborn son has been forcibly removed from her body. Only one other family member is still inside the home, 3-year-old Kinley, Reagan's older daughter. Kinley is in profound shock, but has no physical injuries. Jessica frantically calls emergency services, and this is the moment when the dispatcher makes the critical connection. After hearing the report about the newborn, she links it to another emergency from just an hour earlier. The blood-covered woman stopped on the highway with a newborn in her car. The pieces suddenly fit together. For investigators, this is the breakthrough. They don't have to launch a massive manhunt. Their primary suspect is already in custody. The investigation immediately shifts to the crime scene in New Boston. The first officers to arrive are confronted with such an overwhelming scene that detectives have to stop some of their own colleagues from acting too quickly. Homer gives consent to search the home, but the lead investigator makes a firm procedural decision. The scene will remain untouched until a search warrant is officially obtained. A single mistake in the investigative process could jeopardize the entire case in court. They lose valuable hours, even though security cameras at Homer's workplace provide him with a rock-solid alibi. The house is sealed off. From that point forward, the case belongs to the forensic team. The moment crime scene investigators enter the Hancock home, they immediately rule out the possibility of a domestic argument or self-defense. The damage throughout the living room points to a deliberate and methodical attack. After reviewing countless criminal investigations, I've seen many cases driven by emotion. But here, what stands out is the level of planning and calculated intent behind every action. The forensic examination documents more than 100 sharp force injuries on Reagan's body. Investigators also record 39 blunt force impacts to her head. The weapon turns out to be a heavy glass jar weighing about 4.5 pounds, filled with pink and blue decorative sand. It had been a wedding keepsake displayed in the Hancock home. Taylor used it as one of the weapons during the crime, but the most important detail is hidden in the pattern of the injuries. Out of more than 100 sharp force wounds, not a single one struck Reagan's abdomen. Every injury is concentrated on her head, neck, and upper chest. Parker acted with surgical precision, protecting the one thing she considered her objective, the unborn daughter. To remove the infant, Taylor used a veterinary scalpel she had brought with her. Later, forensic investigators recover a broken fragment of that thin blade from Reagan's neck. Afterward, the attacker made a deep incision running from the ear toward the throat. At that point, it had nothing to do with delivering the baby. It was done to make absolutely certain the victim would not survive. As the medical examiner reviewed the autopsy findings, one detail stood out above all the others. Tiny fragments of Reagan's own uterine tissue were found beneath her fingernails. That meant she remained conscious far longer than investigators had first believed. As she lost blood, the young mother fought until her final moments. With her bare hands, she tried to hold herself together while protecting her daughter. The most heartbreaking part is that throughout the entire attack, 3-year-old Kinley was hiding beneath a blanket in the next room. She heard everything that happened, yet somehow remained unnoticed. Once Parker finishes what she came to do, she runs into an unexpected problem. The living room floor is covered in blood. The struggle had been so intense that investigators would later have to collect the responding officer's footwear to separate their footprints from those left by the attacker. If Taylor walked out wearing her blood-covered sandals, she would leave a trail leading straight back to her. She makes a cold, practical decision. She removes the blood-stained sandals and leaves them at the scene. Then she finds a clean pair of Reagan's sneakers, puts them on, and walks out of the house. Months later, those abandoned sandals become one of the strongest pieces of physical evidence in the case. Prosecutors need to prove that the bloody shoe prints on the tile floor came from that exact pair. Investigators locate the same model on eBay. Inside a forensic laboratory, they recreate the flooring from the Hancock home, cover it with donor blood, and have an investigator walk across it wearing the matching sandals. The resulting tread pattern is a perfect match. Science doesn't rely on stories. It documents facts. In the fall of 2022, the trial finally begins. The defense tries to spare Taylor from the possibility of a death sentence by making an argument that shocks the courtroom. Her attorneys claim that, legally, someone cannot kidnap a person who was already deceased, arguing that the infant had not been born alive. But the medical records completely dismantled that defense. When little Braxlyn Sage arrived at the hospital, doctors documented a pulse of 58 beats per minute. She was alive when she was taken from the house. What's remarkable is the way Taylor reacts throughout the proceedings. You might expect tears or some sign of remorse. Instead, Parker arrives in court wearing a face mask decorated with sunflowers. That was the same flower chosen as the central theme of Reagan's wedding. Even while in jail, the defendant continues weaving new schemes. She searches for wealthy supporters through letters, offers fabricated confessions in exchange for favors, and even tries to recruit false witnesses for $500, hiding her instructions in the margins of Sudoku puzzles.